Hello, everyone. I'm Ngani and Ndimbie, and on behalf of the Drive Electric PA Coalition, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the third webinar in our series celebrating National Drive Electric Week. Today's presentation will focus on you, PA residents. I know that you can't see the number of people who are on the webinar, but we have 83 people today, and the numbers are climbing. So thank you for logging in, and thank you for being interested in this topic that means so much to us. So we want today's presentation to be as interactive as possible. In order to ask questions on this platform, please use the chat function. It should be at the bottom of the window that you're looking at. You might see an icon with a little conversation bubble or the word chat. So please select all panelists in the drop-down before sending your questions. The two photos that you see on this slide are of myself and my colleague Colton Brown. We're co-hosting today. Today you'll also hear from a variety of Drive Electric PA Coalition members, DEPA as we call it. DEPA includes state agencies, electric car companies, charging companies, clean cities coalitions, utility companies, environmental organizations, and many other stakeholders. It's a smart and engaging bunch. We've been proud to work together and excited to put together today's presentation. And I think by the end of the presentation, you'll see why. And Colton will explain a little bit more.
Thank you, and if you just joined, please open your chat bubble by clicking the chat icon in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Chat your recipient to all panelists and let us know your comments and questions anytime throughout the presentation. So today's webinar will cover electric vehicle growth in Pennsylvania, industry and state commitments to vehicle electrification, benefits of electric vehicles, some basics about them, including charging, and available incentives in Pennsylvania, as well as some time to answer your questions. And now I have the honor of introducing our special guest speaker, Secretary Patrick McDonnell, who will introduce why and how Pennsylvania is supporting electric vehicle growth. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Colton. Thank you, Ngani. Pleasure to be here with you all this morning, and I'll keep this brief so you can get to the main event, which is learning more about the variety of programs that we have. But just to share a couple of thoughts. One, we here at DEP have been supporting electric vehicle growth and electrification of our transportation infrastructure because we think it really will improve the lives of Pennsylvanians. Right now, electric vehicles are generally more expensive than some comparable gasoline-fueled vehicles, but we're seeing their price dramatically drop. In 2018, we saw a 50% increase in the amount of electric vehicles that were sold in the state. So we know that's a sector that's growing. On our end, we see that transition leading to better air quality, improved health, lower costs for fueling and maintaining vehicles, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and potential for net job increases across the state. And we know that electric vehicle sales will continue to grow. We've seen where the major car manufacturers have committed significant resources to electrifying their future car fleet. So we know more and more is coming, but we want to make sure that we are leaning into that and really taking advantage of where the market is going to get as much benefit out of it as soon as possible as we can. A couple commitments that we've made besides what's been referenced already. One, the governor has had signed an executive order 2019-1 that committed Pennsylvania to a 26% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. And significantly, it also included a goal of electrifying the state's vehicle fleet, 25% of the fleet by 2025, to lead by example. Pennsylvania also recently signed a memorandum of understanding with a number of other states to set a minimum goal of 30% zero-emission vehicles market share for new medium and heavy-duty vehicles that are sold in 2030, and 100% of that market share by 2050. Some of the things we're doing to support growing the electric vehicle sector within the state. One has already been mentioned, which is organizing the Drive Electric PA Coalition, public events, including the one you're all on right now. Establishment of that Pennsylvania Environmental Vehicle Roadmap and those strategies that were just referenced a moment ago. Providing funding through Driving PA Forward programs for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And during this webinar, I want to make sure, please make sure you're listening, make sure you're asking questions. This is really an opportunity for you to learn about the benefits of electric vehicles, how to charge them, where to charge them, how to reduce range anxiety, and available incentives that are out there, including our own state rebate program for electric vehicle purchases. We here at DEP and PennDOT and state of Pennsylvania hope you are all staying safe and healthy, and hope that you get a lot out of this webinar. So with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you, Secretary McDonnell. If you just joined, I see the number keeps going up a little bit. Please open your chat in the lower right-hand corner of your screen by clicking the chat icon and set your recipient to all panelists, and let us know any comments and questions throughout the presentation. Now, as we continue here, you will hear from many organizations that actively participate on that Drive Electric PA Coalition that Ngani mentioned, and they help make this National Drive Electric event a reality. On each slide, you will see the speaker's name and organization in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. Thank you.
Hi, the modern EV market really launched in 2010 and 2011 with the introduction of the Chevy Bolt and the Nissan Leaf. As you can see, the Bolt and the Leaf, as they were setting the market in the early years of the decade, grew steadily.
Sorry, Tom. You're pretty faint and kind of coming in and out. Can you speak a little clearer into whatever microphone you have?
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. So the market grew steadily in the early years of the decade in what we really think of as the generation one of electric vehicles, modern EVs in the U.S. So we saw that steady growth, and then in 2016, 2017, 2018, you really see generation two of EVs coming along as we move beyond just the Volt and the Leaf into a broader array of vehicles, many of which were achieving driving ranges in the 200-300 mile electric charge range, and coming much closer, if not even, with conventional internal combustion engines in terms of total cost of ownership over a lifetime. So currently at the end of 2019, which isn't on this chart, we, through data from the DEP and the DMV, we know we have around 20,000 total electric vehicles in the market. So it really demonstrates that huge growth that we saw in electric vehicle adoption. Around 11,000 of those are in Southeast PA, the remainder throughout the state. So there is both deepening adoption and a broadening of the areas where the vehicles are being purchased and put on the road. We're in 2020 near the end of the second generation of EV technology and anticipating another real stair step in growth as electric vehicles move into the SUV, crossover, and pickup segments that are such a large part of the market. So move on to the next slide. In terms of the charging infrastructure, which is always important to folks, number one, around 80% of charging occurs at home or in workplaces, but we have seen a rapid expansion in the number of public charging plugs available. Currently, we're at about 1,700. And then by the end of 2020, to give you an idea, of the growth of charging will nearly double from 2018 to 2020. I'll say as someone who worked on pilot projects in the early part of the decade, encouraging businesses and local governments to install charging. At that time, there was so little demand, you really could not, it was difficult to give away a charger. That is anything but the case now, as you see with the rapid expansion. So, one thing that at PECO we've continued working hard to do is to supplement this increasing network of commercial chargers with a strategic, essential public access network that, and we're big supporters of legislation in the Pennsylvania legislature. It's passed the Senate, trying to get it through the House, that would establish a essential public access network to make it more convenient for everyone to be able to purchase an EV and know they could drive it wherever they needed to go and have access to charging.
Great. Thanks, Tom. This is Alyssa Berger. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. As Tom and Colton and the Secretary have alluded to, there continues to be a lot of momentum around electric vehicles in the light duty space, medium and heavy duty. And in particular, I just wanted to call out, for example, some of the more recent company commitments. For example, General Motors recently announced a $20 billion with a B investment in electric vehicles. They're currently testing battery systems for next generation EVs, and they plan on introducing a whole family of electric vehicles and accompanying tech. You have Ford with a $1.35 billion investment to build EVs in Canada as well as the United States, a $700 million investment in jobs in building electric vehicles in the United States. Toyota, big recent returns on their electric vehicles with plans to sell 5.5 million electric vehicles by 2025. So really right around the corner. You have Hyundai with $52 billion investing in with 1/3 on electric vehicles. And then Volkswagen as well, strong commitments in the electric vehicle space. You also have trends like that of California, which recently announced they will be banning internal combustion engine light duty vehicles as of 2035, at which case all new vehicles sold will need to be electric vehicles. Next slide, please. The other thing to think about is that, increasingly there are more and more models. So there's over 55 different models available currently in Pennsylvania to buy, with that number ever expanding. And something worth pointing out that while COVID has impacted a number of different industries, in the long term, prospects really remain undimmed for transportation electrification. So it's really not if, it's when and what that transition looks like. COVID actually interrupted a steady 10 successive years of strong growth for electric vehicles, which is really quite exciting. And according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, analysis suggests actually that internal combustion engine vehicles sales peak in 2017. So all of this suggests that electric vehicles will continue to grow and one day dominate. And this is really an exciting opportunity for Pennsylvania citizens, stakeholders, decision makers to plan for and embrace that change. So with that, I will hand it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Yes, so in addition to the commitments by a variety of equipment manufacturers, there's also been commitments by the states. So we, as the Secretary mentioned, the governor signed an executive order committing to a reduction in greenhouse gases across the Commonwealth. But Governor Wolf has also launched a Lead by Example initiative in which state agencies will replace 25% of their passenger fleets with electric vehicles by 2025.
And the other big commitment that the Secretary mentioned is that Pennsylvania signed on to the Medium and Heavy Duty Zero Emission Vehicle Memorandum of Understanding earlier this summer, along with 14 other states and Washington, D.C. This document sets a goal that 30% of new medium and heavy duty vehicle sales will have zero emission by 2030, and that 100% will be zero emission by 2050. Please stay tuned over time as the details on that are worked out and we find the mechanisms and strategies to achieve those goals.
So next we're going to talk a little bit more about understanding why so many EV drivers love driving electric. First up, all electric plug-in vehicles let us completely eliminate gasoline from our lives. A plug-in hybrid, on the other hand, cuts the typical driver's gas consumption in half. This translates to significant money savings. Fueling up with electricity costs about $5,000 over the lifetime of a vehicle, whereas a gasoline car costs about $18,000. It's also important to mention how much money EV drivers save on maintenance over time. So ultimately, an EV is going to cost about 50 to 70% over the lifetime of the vehicle than a gas vehicle to operate. Next slide. And all of this gas savings translates directly to emission savings. According to the Department of Energy, EVs plugging in Pennsylvania have about 1/3 the greenhouse gas emissions as a gasoline vehicle. EVs also emit significantly less fine particulate matter and NOx, leading to improved local air quality for communities. As renewable energy provides more and more electricity to power our lives, these figures get even better. So I think we're really headed in the right direction here in Pennsylvania.
So we look at we know pollution, and it starts with a new study done by Nature Research that Pennsylvania has the most premature deaths per capita caused by air pollution of any state. Outdoor air pollution adversely affects human health and is estimated to be responsible for 5 to 10% of the total annual premature mortality in the United States. In another study by researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology concluded that air pollution caused more than 4,800 Pennsylvanians to die prematurely in 2018. So Pennsylvania came in third largest among premature deaths caused by air pollution, but has the highest rates of premature deaths per resident. Another new report by Sierra Club, the Blue Green Alliance, United Auto Workers, and the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy will create 500,000 jobs. The report, called Gearing Up, confirms what many Americans, especially those in Michigan, already know. Tells the story about what happens when we act not just to protect our planet, but saves families money at the pump, ensure our auto industry is competitive as possible. Gearing Up shows standards for 2017 to 2025 vehicles will create 570,000 jobs across our economy, including 50,000 jobs in the auto industry. By 2030, we'll be saving at least 3.5 million barrels of oil per day, keeping more than 600 million metric tons of global warming pollution out of the atmosphere and saving us a net of $150 billion. Our markets are on the rise, like one of the electric vehicles, and supporting charging infrastructure. The emerging chain of these products offers the prospect of business jobs growth that can be seen on the local level in places with strengths in the required skill sets. Recently, AAE released the first ever study that employment potential for supply chain for electric transportation focused on Pennsylvania. This study, prepared by BW Research Partners, found that electric transportation could create additional jobs in the Keystone State, but also found there were around 350 companies in the state could immediately be retooled and retrofitted to supply the EV market. This would add a surprisingly large transportation business activity already established in Pennsylvania. As it turns out, in the early stages of the market, electric transportation currently maintains 4,400 jobs across the state, which is about the size of the natural gas extraction employment in Pennsylvania, and is estimated to account for 434 million Pennsylvania gross state product in 2019. 500 plus Pennsylvania companies could gain business and jobs from the electric transportation.
Good morning. I'm going to start off with a little history lesson and describe the different types of EVs and hybrids. But I just want to start off with a little history lesson so everybody understands about the internal combustion engine. Was invented in 1886. And the electric vehicle, it's not new, it was actually invented before the internal combustion engine in 1870, and there was a vehicle named the PI. As you all know, probably Ford, with their assembly line plant, had introduced the Model T in 1908, and in 1912, when they started selling them to the public, their cost was $650 versus an electric vehicle cost, which was more than double that of $1,750. So that was part of the reason that gasoline had taken off over the electric. The other reason that internal combustion engines have prevailed predominantly is because there wasn't electricity back in the rural communities back when they started. So gasoline became the preferred fuel for vehicles, and then EVs all but disappeared by 1935. So just to let you know, the EVs have been around as long as conventional gas cars. So moving into what hybrids are. Hybrids are basically vehicles that have gas engines and an electric motor. They have the shorter battery travels for short distances, and they use regenerative braking, which means once you step on the brakes, it charges the battery a little bit to give you a little bit more distance on that type of car. Okay, so then people were talking about what's PHEV, stands for plug-in hybrid vehicle. That has both an electric motor and a gas engine. You can go a little bit further with that. The nice things about plug-in hybrids is that it's a seamless transition from electricity to gasoline. If you run out of your electric power, it'll just automatically flip over to your gasoline engine, thus giving you better range in that type of vehicle. And then the last type of vehicle that we're going to describe is regular electric vehicle. Currently, there's over 75 models out there, and I should have said that back in the plug-in hybrids. There's over 96 models of plug-in hybrids available today. Most of the electric vehicles right now go over 100 miles per charge, and they're getting better every day. And there's different types of battery technology that are being improved and instituted every day. So you will see more all EV cars on the road within the next coming years.
When we look at EV charging, there are 3 levels of chargers. First is the level 1, which ties into a 120-volt NEMA wall outlet in your home or garage, essentially running an extension cord to your car to charge. This provides what we refer to as a trickle charge of 3 to 5 miles of range per hour. For example, if you have a Tesla at 0% battery, it will take approximately 2 days to charge. It's not ideal, but it does work. Next, we have level 2 charging. This is the most common type of charging stations that we see in private residences, workplace, multifamily, retail, and fleet. This connects into a 208 or a 240 volt service, typically between 40 to 80 amps per port, which provides on average 20 to 25 miles of range per hour. And the great thing with level 2 is all electric vehicles, whether plug-in hybrid, all electric, or Teslas, can charge on a level 2 charging station. Lastly, we have what's called level 3 or DC fast chargers. This connects into generally a 480 3-phase charger, which is typically ideal for highway charging at depots or service stations. It's great for on-the-go charging. You can charge up your vehicle within about 20 to 30 minutes, getting about 80% battery charge. Not every vehicle currently can accept a DC fast charge, But as more and more automotive manufacturers are committing to EVs and the battery technology is advancing, you will see more and more DC fast charging capable vehicles. Next slide, please. So there's different types of charging plugs. For level 1 and level 2, we are looking at a J1772, which is standard for all level 1 and level 2 charging. Any vehicle with a charging capability, whether a plug-in hybrid, battery electric, or a Tesla, can charge on a J1772. However, the Teslas will need an adapter to connect into the J1772. But the great thing about that is, you know, all Teslas come with equipped with an adapter in the back of their vehicle. And then when you see that the Tesla charging stations, only Teslas can charge on those charging stations because they have their own proprietary charging technology.
So let's talk about fast charging a little bit more. So it's very important to keep in mind two important facts before we talk a little bit about fast charging. One is that most of us drive under 40 miles a day. And number two, that if you have a home and a place to charge the electric car at your home, then it is likely that about 90% of all of the charging that car will ever need will be done at home at night. So keep those two facts in mind as we talk a little bit about fast charging, what it is and why we need it. So as you heard from the previous speaker, a lot of the cars that are going to be coming into the market in the next 12 to 24 months are going to be capable of taking charge at a much higher power. And for the driver, that means getting a charge faster. So today, if you're traveling on a long trip and you run out of gas, you stop at a gas station and you fill up in about 5 or 10 minutes after you've gone to the bathroom and probably gotten some water. DC fast charging really needs to look a lot like that for those kinds of trips. They're not going to be the most common trips, as I said before. 90% of your miles will likely be charged at home at night. However, there's a bunch of folks that don't have convenient places to charge at home at night. They may need to rely on fast charging to get a weekly charge, similar to what they do with gas stations today. So understand fast charging is a key important part of how this market works and develops, and also understand that we really need to send a signal with DC fast charging because a lot of people have what's called range anxiety, which is that fear of running out of charge. We know Elon Musk solved this in order to solve his cars by building his proprietary network. So the charging stations, the DC charging stations you'll encounter have two kinds of plugs, a CCS plug and a CHAdeMO plug. It's just different plug shapes, and all electric vehicles can use one of these plugs, and as mentioned before, Tesla uses an adapter for CHAdeMO or relies on their own network. It is important to note that most of the vehicles coming into the market are going to be more relying on CCS. We think the CHAdeMO design is not going to be a big player in North America going forward. So how to find a charging station if you're planning a long distance trip. And, you know, again, a lot of the cars coming into the market are capable of getting between 200 and 300 miles to the charge. And remember, I said you're driving about 40 miles a day on average. However, if you need to grab a fast charge because you're going on a longer trip or you didn't get to charge the night, there are a number of tools that are available to you. If you want to dig a little bit deep and go into all kinds of interesting data, one of the resources listed here, the Alternative Fuels Data Center that is kept by our federal government, is a great place to find a whole bunch of really interesting information. But if you're just really wanting to get from point A to point B, a lot of electric car drivers, I am one, find that the Plug Share or Charge Hub are also very helpful, user-friendly websites and apps. These all have phone apps. You can go on a website, but you can download an app, which is what most of us do when we're planning a trip. There's also increasingly in-car support. So the cars themselves and the infotainment section in those cars often now provide a tool where you can find a charging station. It's important when you look at these tools that you understand a few important things. A, what kind of charge are you looking at? Fast charges come in different flavors, meaning different speeds. The higher the power rating, the faster the charge, but your car also has to be capable of accepting it. So there's several things to consider there depending on how fast you need that charge and what kind of a car you're driving. These fast chargers range now from getting you to full in over an hour, which is not ideal, to the more high-speed ones, and the cars that accept those can probably get you to about 80% in under 30 minutes. So this is very much evolving. We need to keep our eye on it, and we need to get the consumers smart about when they need this particular type of charging and what to look for in terms of the features that are going to work for you when you need it.
As Pam mentioned, so DC fast charging is most important to enable long-distance trips. So PennDOT has partnered with the Department of Environmental Protection to engage in inventorying the locations of public non-Tesla chargers in Pennsylvania. So the dark lines on this map show the locations show the corridors where we have fast charging spaced 50 miles and less apart. The dashed lines show where we have fast charging available, but it's spaced further apart. And our goal is really to get all of these corridors to be in the dark color, to have these charging stations these fast charging stations spaced 50 miles and less apart. But what good is great charging infrastructure if it's not adjacent to equally great roads? So the way that the internal combustion engine vehicle driver contributes to the maintenance of our roadways is through the gas tax. So instead, EV owners pay the alternative fuels tax. It's paid by the kilowatt hour, and it's actually at a very low rate, about $68 for a year's worth of driving on average. So you can visit the Department of Revenue's website for more details, but I'll also drop some information into the chat about paying the alternative fuels tax. One of the trade-offs that you might hear is if you have a battery electric vehicle and you're in a county where you pay an emissions tax, or where you pay emissions, get an emissions sticker, you actually don't have to pay that with an electric vehicle, so you can kind of see a trade-off. There's plenty of savings that we've already discussed. So just one additional tax there, which is the alternative fuels tax.
There's been a lot of discussion about vehicle charging up till now. This discussion relates to what has been termed range anxiety. This is a concern that drivers of electric vehicles have, that their battery will run out of juice before they reach their destination, or that they will reach their destination with a low battery and not have enough charge to get home. First, note that range anxiety does not apply to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which seamlessly turn to their gasoline engine when their battery is depleted. There are three factors in ensuring that an all-electric vehicle has enough electricity to complete its journey. These are trip distance, battery size, and charging availability. And I think Pam covered a little bit of this, but I will repeat probably a bit. The vast majority of people on a typical day drive their car under 30 miles. This is well within the range of every all-electric vehicle sold today. Batteries are much larger now than they were in earlier all-electric vehicles and thus provide a much longer range. In fact, most new all-electric vehicles have ranges of well over 100, 200, or even 300 miles on a single charge. Thus, many electric vehicle owners have found that they have essentially no range anxiety. They can go several days without charging the battery and top it off when it's convenient, generally overnight at home or during the workday at their place of employment, or both. Finally, as has been noted, there are an increasing number of publicly available chargers, allowing drivers to top off when it's convenient or stop on the highway during longer trips. And more public chargers are being put in all the time. Next slide. To encourage the purchase of new electric vehicles, the federal government offers an income tax credit of up to $7,500 for the purchase of new electric vehicles. All electric vehicles, that is, battery electric vehicles, receive the full $7,500 tax credit, while plug-in hybrid electric vehicles receive a tax credit between $2,500 and $7,500. The tax credit was set up to jumpstart the electric vehicle economy, and the tax credit does not apply to vehicles made by manufacturers that have sold over 200,000 electric vehicles, which both General Motors and Tesla have done. In addition, there's a federal tax credit for 30% of the cost, up to $1,000, for installing home charging equipment. Note, however, that this tax credit ends at the end of 2000.
So Pennsylvania also offers its own electric vehicle incentive to residents. You can receive up to a $750 rebate for the purchase of a new electric vehicle, or a $500 rebate for the purchase of a used electric vehicle or a new or used plug-in hybrid. Used vehicles must have less than 75,000 miles at the time of purchase. New and used vehicles must have a purchase price of less than $50,000 to be eligible for a rebate. There is also an additional $1,000 that can be added to the rebate amount for low-income households. For more details, please visit the webpage that I will post in the chat momentarily. Pennsylvania has a variety of other incentives that are available for businesses, local government, fleets, and other organizations. Through these programs, we have helped fund the installation of more than 1,000 charging plugs throughout Pennsylvania. For more information on these programs, please watch the webinar recording from earlier this week, or tune to the Fleet Manager webinar tomorrow, or you can find them on web pages for the Driving PA Forward programs and our Alternative Fuel Incentive Grant program.
So a common question with EVs is why now? So it was mentioned earlier in the presentation that they've been around for quite some time, since the 1800s. One of the biggest key factors in EV growth is falling battery prices. You can see from the chart that in 2010 it cost $1,183 per kilowatt hour, and at the end of 2019 that cost was down to $156 per kilowatt hour, so falling very rapidly. The batteries aren't just getting cheaper, they are also getting better. They're getting more efficient and have longer lifespans. So lots of innovation happening here around batteries. The batteries are also the biggest cost of an EV. So lower battery prices drive down the price of the vehicle itself. And we're getting closer to reaching price parity with internal combustion vehicles. The magic number for price parity is generally expected to be around $100 per kilowatt hour. So we're getting very, very close. So we know EV adoption is growing, but as you can see from the chart, we are still early. We know the vehicles are getting better and less expensive. Sales are increasing as more and more manufacturers begin making competitive EVs for consumers. And that trend will continue to accelerate along that growth curve as this progresses. Also, as more used EVs become available, more consumers will have access to electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids at lower costs, and more charging stations are being installed every day. The driving range of EVs on the market or entering the market is also increasing, so they can go further without needing to charge, and charging time is getting shorter as more high-powered stations are being implemented through corridors and highways and rest stops. But as a reminder, I know it's been said earlier, but most EV drivers don't make a trip to refill their vehicle. They primarily charge their vehicles where they spend most of their time. So the majority of charging does take place at home overnight, and they wake up each day with a full tank. And many also can plug in at work or destinations like hotels, retail centers, rest stops, etc., which help with longer trips.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to all of everyone in the audience who's providing all these great questions. Now is the fun part where we get to dive into these questions that you are all adding here. First, we're getting a lot of questions regarding DC fast charging cost, the cost of charging in general, and those are some great questions. So we mentioned that the cost of charging is generally about 70% less than fueling a gasoline vehicle. So the way that works out for your home charging is most of us in Pennsylvania pay about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, plus or minus a couple cents for your electricity. Now, based on how many miles you go per kilowatt, it essentially works out to 80 cents or a little less to drive 30 miles on electric. And 30 miles is a pretty typical miles per gallon in a gasoline vehicle. So, 80 cents is about a third, even a little less than the price of gasoline right now. So with home charging, you do pay significantly less. I personally have a plug-in hybrid and an already low electric bill, and I barely even notice the increase in the electric. A fully electric vehicle owner might see, if they drive their vehicle a good bit, they might see an increase in electric bill of $30 to $50 a month if they're driving a good number of miles. So really, when you compare that to the expenditure on gas, it's significantly less. The cost for DC fast charging, we got a number of questions on that. It can vary pretty drastically based on one DC fast charger to another. Some might charge based on time, some might charge based on kilowatt. Many of them will charge in the range of about 40 cents per kilowatt hour, which is obviously significantly higher than what you pay at home at that 11 cents per kilowatt hour. That winds up coming out to about cost parity with what you would pay to fill up with a tank of gas. So if you needed 200 miles, that might cost you $20, $25, about the same that it would to fill up that many miles with gasoline. So you do pay that premium for DC fast charging, but as we mentioned, you don't need to use DC fast charging very often. Ngani, would you like to take us through any of the other questions we've been receiving?
Sure. One of the other questions that we received was about how high and low air temperatures affect battery output and range. I know that we have a bunch of panelists who are electric vehicle owners, and if anybody wants to talk about that and reflect on their personal experiences as well as their expertise.
Yeah, this is Rob Graff. Pam answered that to some extent Pam Frank answered that to some extent in the chat. Generally, there's the best range for an electric vehicle is when the temperature is, not too hot, not too cold, just right. And you don't need to use, there's sort of two things that happen that reduce the range of electric vehicles. One is the battery doesn't charge as fast or as fully when it's very cold. But probably more importantly is the battery, the load to keep the passenger compartment comfortable, either by heating it or cooling it, takes a lot of load. And so if you're driving in a 70-degree day on a long trip, you'll be fine with the range will be pretty much at its maximum. If you're in stop-and-go traffic on the Schuylkill Expressway, when it's 95 degrees outside and you're moving very slowly, so you may even be using more energy to cool the car than move the car, because electric vehicles are very efficient in moving the cars. So your range could go down to 60% of its range or even lower in the worst conditions. But with vehicles currently with their long ranges, that's almost never a problem for daily commuting, even in the coldest of weather.
Great.
Rob, to add on to that, as an owner of two EVs, we've both my wife and I have found very modest losses of range in high temperatures, and as Rob noted, it is primarily from the air conditioning, not from the actual loss of efficiency in the battery. The bigger effect that we've both witnessed is in colder temperatures, loss of battery range anywhere from 20 to 30% when you get into the 20s and 30s for the temperatures.
Thanks, Tom. Colton, I think this question is definitely for you. can we apply for an ASIG refund for EVs purchased 2 years ago?
No, so that would not be an eligible alternative fuel incentive grant project, either for an organization or for an individual. So if it's an organization that's purchasing vehicles or charging equipment, we have a separate program I did not mention, so it's not as applicable. You do have to apply for that before you would be going to start the project. If we're talking about a vehicle purchase for an individual, you have a set amount of time after the vehicle purchase, which I believe is 6 months, that you have to apply for that rebate. So do get on that shortly after your vehicle purchase so that you get that rebate and ensure that the program rules are still the same as you do so. One other question I wanted to address here quickly, I think we just had one of them, but it's an important one that we get a lot, is how long will the batteries last? It's because the battery is such a significant component of the vehicle price and would be a significant repair if it had to be replaced. It's a very common question, something that people are often concerned about when they look at electric vehicles. So, and the short answer is it depends. So the different things that complicate how long a battery will last, the primary is kind of the temperature, the climate where you operate, and how good the vehicle's temperature management system is for that battery. So if you have a vehicle with a passive cooling system, so it basically just relies on air moving past the battery, they do not last as well. The worst cases I've heard of that are vehicles out in like the desert Southwest, like Las Vegas, where it's extremely hot, which is not good for the batteries. And a passive cooling system, so they don't stay cool very effectively. I've heard of them where they can be at 75% of their original range at 100,000 miles. So even that's not terrible, but you would certainly like it to be a little better. Vehicles that have active cooling systems, which is actually most electric vehicles on the market now, and operating in a climate of Pennsylvania, which is a bit more temperate. We have some cold temperatures in winter, but the batteries are pretty good at warming themselves. Generally, you're going to see no more than 5% battery degradation per 100,000 miles. So that vehicle can actually go a very long time, potentially even outlasting the body of the vehicle. And they're just getting better every year. So most of the time, especially where we live, you have very little to worry about in terms of the longevity of that battery.
Great. Sorry, Rob.
I was just going to say, and to be clear, that's with newer cars. If you were to buy an old electric vehicle, the battery life will not, the current battery technology is improving, every year. So the newer the car, the longer the battery will last.
Very true. We also received a question about the total cost of ownership someone comparing the total cost of ownership for a battery electric vehicle versus an internal combustion engine vehicle. Sarah from Duquesne Light, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. So I would love to put a plug out here for those who aren't in Duquesne Light service territory. We're on the western side of the state. So I'm linking to a source in the chat that is really applicable for everyone in the state of Pennsylvania. It's an EV guide that has all available electric vehicle models. And what you can do is you can plug in information related to how you drive the vehicle, your sort of use case, how often you drive it, how far you go. And you can find specific information about the MSRP, upfront sticker price for that vehicle, as well as the specific application of all federal and state and local incentives that might be available for that vehicle. And it's going to show you a breakdown of not just your upfront costs, but the total cost of ownership for that vehicle over time compared to a similar gas vehicle. So check that out.
Excellent. Thanks. Colton, we also received a question that I think you'd be best to answer on clarifying the source of the $1,000 tax credit for EV charger installation.
Sure, great. And this kind of speaks to the general question of how do you go about getting the $7,500 federal tax credit for purchase or the $1,000 credit for installing a home charging equipment? And the answer to both is it's done at when you file your taxes. So the following calendar year. So if you purchased a vehicle this calendar year or installed the charging equipment this calendar year, then when you file your taxes for the next year, so when you file your 2020 taxes in 2021, there's a form to be completed. There's one for the vehicle purchase. There's also one for charging equipment. They are filed. The forms are filed separately, but it reduces your income tax liability. So it reduces the amount that you have to pay in income tax, can significantly increase your refund. And if you didn't have sufficient income tax to get the full benefit, I believe it can carry over to the next year so that you can still continue receiving that benefit so you get the full amount that you're eligible for. It looks like we got some links to those forms. Thank you, Rob.
One other thing I wanted to join in, this is, again, Tom Bonner from PICO. Both PICO and Duquesne have websites for all of our customers where you can model your own driving habits, your commuting patterns, pick from the range of vehicles you may be interested in, having a fuel cost calculator that can give anyone in our service territory who's interested in an EV a pretty comprehensive look at their options and what their likely after purchase savings will be from purchasing an EV. So certainly encourage anyone to go visit those websites to model that out and get more information.
Great. Going to answer a couple quick answer questions. This webinar will be available on the web afterwards. The recording will get posted to the same web page that you use to register. So that same AMPed web page, we'll change it a little bit after this week so that it's kind of just a repository of the saved recordings.
Colton, it might be useful to also post the slides because they have live links in them that are not available in the recording.
Yes, thank you for that. Good point. One other tougher question here. What are options for those without driveways or garages or people in apartment buildings? This is a really tough one in an area that electric vehicles and charging infrastructure specifically still have some room to improve. There's no easy answer. There's no catch-all. Basically, you have to get the property owner on board, or you can use, nearby public level 2 or DC fast charging stations. There's a number of locations where, maybe a city or a borough will put in a public station because they know there's some residential areas that don't have driveways or parking where they can install it themselves. So that's an option. But, there's a number of ways to address it, but it's not always easy. Do any of our speakers have a little more info on that topic?
I would just offer that available workplace charging, as we kind of look at strategies that are going to be able to solve things for this specific use case, was looked at as being a very viable one. But given the number of us that are working from home, we can see some of the flaws in that strategy. But we know that one of the challenges that we need to solve is figuring that multi-unit housing problem and question.
Yeah, this is Tony Bandio from Eastern Pennsylvania Alliance for Clean Transportation. There are some other models that some other states are using where they're actually trying to use community hubs so people can park their cars or even don't even have to buy cars and can use electric vehicles that are parked in community hubs. So that could help solve that problem as well.
This is Rob Graff from DVRBC with just one more comment on this, is that, you have to remember that every trip has destination, right? So if you have a car at your apartment, think about where you're going. And if you're going to your workplace generally with that car, then lobby your workplace to provide charging, which is where most people use their cars on a regular basis. And if you're able to charge at work with your car over an 8-hour period, you probably won't need to do that even every day. You might just be able to do it one every 2 or 3 days. So I think about where you're driving with your car and whether it does have charging. And then also, as Tony noted, we have increasing options for shared vehicles that will allow you to not need to deal with the charging yourself.
This is Travis. Sorry, just really quick on that too. There are incentives available typically for condos and apartments and other multifamily housing. So having a conversation with the property manager or property owner, there's definitely benefits for them to add charging in general as an amenity, but also going forward, it will become more of an expectation as this market matures. So it's coming, and if it's not there yet for you, I would just say just start the conversation, and also explore those other opportunities, like can you charge at work?
Yes, exactly. As we mentioned, DEP does have incentives for installing level 2 equipment, whether that's at work or for multi-unit residential. So, speak to the property manager, speak to your employer, let them know that's out there to help offset a good portion of the cost so that the charging equipment continues to expand, because those programs will not be there forever. And then they will have to, put in the full cost themselves. But by that point, everyone will be, and it will be the expectation. So we are coming to the end of our time here. We definitely thank you all for your time, for your questions. If there's anything that we did not have a chance to get to, because we had a lot of questions, we do have the contact information up here for myself and Ngani. You can let us know any questions you may have, and we can forward it to the appropriate individuals if it's best for somebody else. Ngani, would you like to end with anything else?
No, I think that's about it. We're so glad that so many people were able to join us today. As Colton mentioned, we have a final presentation tomorrow. That is the fleet manager's presentation, and then we also have a rebroadcast of this presentation. So please let anyone you think would be interested in that information. Let them know that we'll be continuing our week of celebrating electric vehicles.
Ngani, this is Rick Price. I also like to mention that reach out to your Clean Cities organizations, because we have such a big outreach, and we'll be doing a number of educational events over the next coming years.
Great. Thank you. Thank you again, everyone. We hope you have a good rest of your week. Thank you.